I was driving down the familiar road to my parents' house that Thanksgiving evening, Caroline sitting beside me with a homemade apple pie on her lap. 3 years of marriage, and I still believed this would be the year my family finally accepted her. She asked me one more time if I had reminded my mother about her allergy. I squeezed her hand and told her everything would be fine. I did not know that would be the last time I ever walked into that house as part of the family. Before we dive into what happened that night, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story touches you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stay with me through this one because what happened at that dinner table changed everything I ever believed about the people who raised me. My name is Emmett. I am 32 years old, and I grew up in a suburb outside Chicago as the youngest of 3 brothers. For as long as I can remember, I was the odd one out in my family. My oldest brother, Derek, was always the golden child, the one who made big money in real estate and drove fancy cars. My middle brother, Kyle, worked at a bank and earned praise for being quiet and obedient. Then there was me, the kid who wanted to build software instead of following a traditional path. My mother, Diane, never let me forget that my choices disappointed her. When I met Caroline at an education technology conference 4 years ago, I felt like I had finally found someone who understood me. She was an elementary school teacher from Vermont, gentle and patient with a smile that could light up any room. I knew from our very first conversation that I wanted to spend my life with her. But I also knew introducing her to my family would be complicated. The first time I brought Caroline home, my mother barely looked at her. Diane made comments about Caroline coming from a modest family, about teachers not making enough money, about how I could have found someone more suitable. My father, Greg, just sat there silently, letting my mother say whatever she wanted. Derek made jokes that were not really jokes, and his wife Brenda laughed along at every cruel word. But the biggest issue was something none of them took seriously. Caroline has a severe peanut allergy. I'm not talking about a mild reaction or some discomfort. I am talking about anaphylaxis, the kind that can kill you in minutes if you do not get treatment. She carries an EpiPen everywhere she goes, and has done so since she was a child. When she explained this to my family during that first visit, my mother rolled her eyes and said that this generation makes everything into a big deal. Derek laughed and said Caroline probably just wanted attention. Brenda chimed in with some story about how she was allergic to something too, but still ate it anyway. I defended my wife, but they brushed me off like I was overreacting. The Christmas before this Thanksgiving, my mother made a pie with peanuts in the crust. When Caroline asked about the ingredients, my mother looked her straight in the eye and said there were no peanuts. Fortunately, Caroline caught the smell before taking a bite. When the truth came out, my mother claimed she simply forgot. But Derek was laughing in the corner, and I heard him whisper to Brenda that they wanted to see if Caroline was really allergic or just faking it. I was furious. Caroline and I left early that night, and my mother called me the next day to say I had embarrassed the family by making a scene. Then there was my father, Greg's birthday dinner a few months later. Brenda brought a dessert that contained peanut oil. When Caroline politely declined to eat it, Brenda called her rude. My mother said Caroline was ruining the party by being difficult. Once again, I stood up for my wife, and once again, the entire family turned against me. They acted like Caroline was the problem, like her medical condition was some kind of personal insult to them. By the time Thanksgiving came around, Caroline did not want to go. She told me she was tired of being treated like an outsider, tired of having her health dismissed as drama. I understood her feelings completely, but I still held on to hope. I called my mother a week before the holiday and had a serious conversation with her. I explained once more how dangerous peanut allergies are. I told her that even a small amount could send Caroline to the hospital or worse. My mother sighed heavily on the phone and said she understood her voice dripping with irritation. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe that my own mother would not deliberately put my wife in danger. The house looked beautiful when we arrived. Orange and gold decorations covered the porch, and the smell of roasting turkey drifted through the front door. My mother greeted us with a smile that seemed different somehow, though I could not put my finger on why. Derek and Brenda were already there sitting in the living room with glasses of wine. Kyle had come alone as usual and barely acknowledged us when we walked in. Caroline handed my mother the apple pie she had baked, and my mother set it aside without a word of thanks. Dinner started normally enough. The table was covered with all the traditional dishes: turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, and a gravy boat filled with a rich brown sauce my mother said was a new recipe she wanted everyone to try. Caroline asked about the ingredients in each dish, and my mother assured her that everything was safe. I noticed Derek and Brenda exchanging glances across the table, but I told myself I was being paranoid. My mother made a point of encouraging everyone to try her special gravy. She said she had been experimenting with the recipe and wanted honest opinions. Caroline spooned some over her turkey and took a bite. I saw Derek pull out his phone under the table and angle it toward my wife. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was just recording family memories. Something felt wrong, but I pushed the feeling aside. About 10 minutes after we started eating, Caroline put down her fork. She said her throat felt itchy and she was having trouble breathing. I looked at her face and saw her lips starting to swell. My heart dropped into my stomach. I turned to my mother and demanded to know what was in that gravy. She hesitated for a moment, then said there was just a little bit of peanut butter to thicken it. Just a little bit, she said, like it was nothing. Derek burst out laughing. He said they wanted to prove once and for all that Caroline was exaggerating her allergy. He called it a little prank, a joke to show everyone that she was not really as sick as she claimed. Brenda was laughing too, saying Caroline was probably just acting for attention. But Caroline was not acting. Her face was swelling rapidly and she was gasping for air. She fumbled in her purse for her EpiPen with trembling hands. I grabbed the EpiPen and helped her inject it into her thigh. Then I called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Caroline was slumping in her chair, her breathing shallow and labored. The woman on the emergency line told me to keep her calm, and that help was on the way. I held my wife and told her she would be okay, but I was not sure I believed it myself. Derek had stopped laughing by then. He was still holding his phone, but his face had gone pale. My mother kept saying she did not think it would be this bad, that she did not know the allergy was real. My father stood frozen in the corner of the dining room, not saying a word. Kyle had gone outside to wait for the ambulance. Brenda was the only one still trying to minimize the situation, insisting that Caroline was making it worse than it needed to be. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, though it felt like hours. They rushed in with their equipment and immediately started working on Caroline. One of them asked what happened, and I explained about the peanut butter in the gravy. When I mentioned that my family had done it on purpose as a prank, the paramedic looked at them with an expression of disbelief and disgust. They loaded Caroline onto a stretcher and put an oxygen mask over her face. Her eyes were barely open, and her skin had turned a frightening shade of red. I climbed into the ambulance with her holding her hand the entire time. Before the doors closed, I looked back at my family standing on the front lawn. Derek had deleted the video from his phone and was talking quietly with Brenda. My mother ran toward the ambulance calling my name, saying she never meant for this to happen. I did not respond. I could not. The doors shut, and we drove away. At the hospital, they rushed Caroline into the emergency room. A doctor came out after what felt like an eternity and told me she had experienced severe anaphylactic shock. The EpiPen had bought her some time, and the paramedics arriving quickly had saved her life. But if we had waited even a few more minutes, she might not have survived. I sat in a plastic chair outside her room and cried. I thought about every warning I had given my family every time I had explained how serious this was. They had known, they had all known, and they had done it anyway. My mother showed up at the hospital about 2 hours later. She did not ask how Caroline was doing. Instead, she immediately started making excuses. She said Derek had told her that peanut allergies were not really dangerous, that most people just say they have them for attention. She said they only wanted to prove that Caroline was being dramatic. She said it was never supposed to go this far. I asked her why she had believed Derek over her own son and daughter-in-law. I asked her why she had risked Caroline's life for a prank. My mother's response was to blame Caroline. She said my wife had been dividing our family since the day I brought her home. She said I had changed, that I was not the son she raised anymore. She said Caroline had poisoned my mind against my own flesh and blood. While my mother was talking, Derek called her phone. She put it on speaker, and I heard my brother's voice asking if Caroline was okay. But he was not asking out of concern for her. He was asking because he was worried she might press charges. He told my mother to make sure I understood it was just an accident, that nobody meant any harm. He was protecting himself, not expressing remorse for nearly killing my wife. Something inside me snapped. For 32 years, I had been the peacekeeper in my family. I had swallowed my feelings, accepted unfair treatment, and made excuses for people who never showed me the same consideration. But, sitting in that hospital with my wife fighting for her life, I could not do it anymore. I told my mother that she and Derek had almost committed murder. I used those exact words. She gasped and said I was being ridiculous, that I was blowing everything out of proportion. But I was just getting started. I told her about every time I had felt like the least important child in the family. I told her about every cruel comment she had made about my career, my choices, my wife. I told her that I had warned them repeatedly about the allergy, and they had chosen to ignore me. I told her that a real mother would never put her son's wife in danger, no matter what she thought of her. My mother started crying. She called me ungrateful, said she had sacrificed her whole life for her children. She demanded that I apologize for speaking to her that way. She said Caroline had turned me against my own family, and that I would regret choosing her over the people who raised me. A nurse came over and asked my mother to lower her voice because she was disturbing other patients. When my mother refused to leave, security was called to escort her out of the building. Caroline woke up a few hours later. Her face was still swollen and her voice was hoarse, but she was alive. I told her everything that had happened, including the fact that Derek had been recording her reaction on his phone. She cried not from fear, but from the realization that people who were supposed to be her family had deliberately tried to harm her. She said she always knew they did not like her, but she never imagined they wanted her dead. The doctor came in and explained the severity of what had happened. He said anaphylaxis can kill within minutes, and that Caroline was lucky to be alive. He recommended that we consider filing a police report because what had been done to her was not a prank. It was reckless endangerment at minimum. That night, I made a decision. I told Caroline that I was cutting off my family completely. She was worried at first, telling me she did not want me to lose the people who raised me because of her. But I explained that real family does not do what they did. Real family does not laugh while someone struggles to breathe. Real family does not demand an apology after nearly causing a death. Over the next few days, the messages started pouring in. Derek texted me saying I was overreacting and that it was just a harmless joke. He said nobody actually got hurt, as if Caroline being hospitalized did not count. He demanded that I apologize to our mother for making her cry and threatened to tell the entire extended family that I was an ungrateful son. Kyle called me for the first time in months. He said he had not known about Derek and our mother's plan, and I believed him. But then he said I should forgive them because that is what families do. He said I was tearing everyone apart by holding on to this grudge. I realized that Kyle's silence all these years had made him just as complicit as the others. His refusal to ever stand up for what was right was its own kind of betrayal. Even my father called, which almost never happened. He said my mother was devastated and that I needed to come home and make things right. When I asked him what he thought about what they had done to Caroline, he paused for a long time. Then he said that family has to forgive each other. He could not bring himself to say that what they did was wrong. He could not take my side even when my wife had nearly died. I wrote a long message and sent it to our family group chat. I laid out exactly what had happened. I described how my mother had put peanut butter in the gravy, knowing about Caroline's allergy. I described how Derek had recorded the whole thing, expecting to capture my wife's humiliation. I described how they had laughed while she could not breathe. I told them that Caroline and I would not be attending any family events going forward. If anyone wanted to have a relationship with us, they would need to genuinely apologize to Caroline in person and take responsibility for what they had done. Then I blocked Derek and Brenda's numbers. The fallout was immediate. Extended family members started calling me, most of them having heard only my mother's version of events. My Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, left me a voicemail calling me a terrible son for breaking my mother's heart. Cousins I had not spoken to in years sent messages saying I was tearing the family apart. Only my Uncle Tom, my father's older brother, reached out with genuine concern. He asked how Caroline was doing and said he understood why I had made the choice I did. That one phone call meant more to me than all the others combined. The first few weeks after cutting off my family were some of the hardest of my life. I was used to talking to my mother every Sunday, even when those conversations left me feeling worse about myself. The silence felt strange, like a missing limb. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I had made the right choice. Some days I wanted to call and yell at them some more to make them understand what they had done. Other days I just felt sad, mourning the family I wished I had instead of the one I actually grew up with. Caroline was recovering slowly, both physically and emotionally. She had nightmares about not being able to breathe, about nobody helping her. We held each other through those dark nights and promised we would get through this together. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma. She helped me understand patterns I had never recognized before. She explained how I'd always been the one expected to sacrifice my needs to keep everyone else happy. She showed me that setting boundaries was not the same as being disloyal. She helped me see that protecting my wife was not a betrayal of my parents, but rather an act of love and self-respect. Caroline and I grew closer than ever during those months. Without the stress of family gatherings hanging over us, we had more energy for each other. We started new traditions, just the two of us. We made friends with other couples in our neighborhood and built what my therapist called a chosen family. These were people who loved us for who we were, not people we had to constantly prove ourselves to. About 6 months after that Thanksgiving, I received a job offer in another city. Caroline and I talked about it and decided it was the fresh start we needed. We sold our house and moved 300 miles away. We bought a small place with a backyard and adopted a dog we named Biscuit. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My mother still sends emails occasionally. My phone number is blocked, but she found my email address. The messages are always the same. She never apologizes. She never admits what she did was wrong. Instead, she talks about how much I have hurt her, how the family is not the same without me, how I'm punishing everyone for one little mistake. I do not respond to these emails, but I do not delete them either. Maybe someday I will need them as a reminder of why I made this choice. Uncle Tom calls every few months to check in. He tells me my mother still cries about the situation at family dinners, always positioning herself as the victim. Derek, apparently, tells everyone that Caroline sued the family, which is not true. Kyle got engaged recently and did not invite me to the wedding. I heard about it through Uncle Tom, and I felt a small pang of sadness, but it passed quickly. Looking back now, I understand something I could not see when I was in the middle of it. Family is not just about blood. Family is about how you treat each other. It is about respect and safety and love that does not come with conditions. The people who raised me could not offer those things, and that is not my fault. I spent 32 years trying to earn their approval, trying to be good enough, trying to keep the peace. All it got me was a wife in the hospital and a heart full of pain. I do not know if I will ever have a relationship with my parents or brothers again. Maybe someday they will truly understand what they did and offer a genuine apology. Maybe they never will. Either way, I have stopped waiting for them to change before I allow myself to be happy. I have learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even when those people share your last name. Here is what I want you to take from my story. You deserve to be with people who respect you and the ones you love. You do not owe your loyalty to anyone who puts your safety or your spouse's safety at risk. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is survival. And sometimes closing a door is not an ending. It is the beginning of a life where you finally get to choose peace. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to distance yourself from family members who refuse to respect your boundaries? What helped you through that difficult time? Share your story in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss more stories like this one. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to protect your peace and the people you love. Take care of yourself.